Hi, in this video I want to talk about networking a little bit and how you can get two VMs talking. A lot of times what we see in a lab scenario is people will have an issue with being able to get the two VMs talking to each other. And by talking, I just mean communicating over the network, being able to test things, even as simple as a ping command. A ping command is a very simple way that you can test connectivity or that you have a route to reach another computer. And so one thing I want to show in this quick little tutorial is how to, for one, see if, can you make that connection from one VM to the other? And if not, show you a little bit of how you can test that, how you can make changes to fix that. So I've got two VMs spun up here, Updated Kali and Sentinel Server. These are both Kali Linux machines. They look very similar. However, these are going to be two different computers that we're going to have in our lab scenario. And what we want to do is we want to be able to communicate between these two. And so, like I said, first thing we want to do is look at the IP address and the network that we are on. So this is our updated Kali machine. You'll see this 192.168.118/24, and you'll see the network mask here. And if we look at our Sentinel server, and I do IP ADDR, that's how you can see all the IP addresses. You'll see on the updated Kali box, there's multiple because there's Docker containers and other things running. But anyway, nonetheless, we're primarily looking at ETH0, and a lot of times that'll be what interface is active on your Linux machines. But if you see this one, 192.168.31.128, and you'll see the network mask is also different. So based off of this, looking at this alone, I can tell you that there's a very low likelihood that we're able to communicate between these two machines at this rate, because I've not done any additional networking or anything like that. So we can test that by typing in 192.168.31. Let me go back to this. 1.18. So if I try to ping, again, test connectivity, see if I can reach that machine, you're going to see network is unreachable. And it's because we're not on the same network. And on the other end, we can take the IP address of the Sentinel sensor. I think I said Sentinel server earlier. Sorry. Sentinel sensor is just the name I made up. If I copy this one and go to the updated Kali machine and I try to ping the IP address of the Sentinel sensor, you'll see that normally data would be populating here if it was able to connect. And I'll just hit Control-C to stop this. And you'll see 100% packet loss. What this shows is that we don't have connectivity between these two machines. And again, we said that in the beginning by looking at the IP address and the network mask, we could already tell that. But I just wanted to walk through this to give you kind of an idea. So one thing, this is very common when people are, again, setting up a home lab, trying to get multiple machines networked together and unable to do so. One thing that you want to do is you want to come in here and look at your VM settings. So I'm using VMware Workstation. I'm on the Sentinel sensor. I've got this one highlighted. I'm going to click on VM and I want to go to settings. And what we're going to do here is we're going to look at the network adapter settings, And what you'll see here is there's different options. There's different ways you can configure your VM to to connect to different networks. So bridged, if you put this in bridged mode, it's going to connect exactly to your home network or whatever your host machine's connected to. So I've got a Windows machine that's running VMware. It's going to connect to the same network as my host machine. So for instance, at my home, I've got phones, I've got multiple laptops, my gaming devices, etc., all on my network, including this host machine. If I do bridged, then this VM will be able to see and communicate with all of those other devices that I just mentioned. If I do a NAT or host only, basically it's going to create a network just exists within this environment. So if I'm on a host only network, that's just between me and this host, and I'm not going to be able to communicate with these other VMs or any of those devices that are on my home network. Again, to communicate with my home network, I would need to be in bridged. If I use host only, I'm only on between me and the host. If I do a NAT network or a specific virtual network, which is what I like to use, basically I can create a little network that all of my VMs are on so that they can communicate to each other, but nothing on my home network or anything like that will be communicating with those VMs. So this is a really good setup and how typically you'd want to set up a home lab whenever you're doing things for like a course or you want to test things, again, across multiple VMs, but you don't want them to interact with anything else on your network, you're going to want to use either a NAT or a custom specific virtual network. I like to do that just because you can have different virtual networks set up. And so what I'll show you before, or I'm going to go ahead and change my Sentinel sensor to be on VMnet 0. And I want to show you what that does. So once I click OK, give it a few seconds, you'll notice this little network icon up here. If you don't see, you'll see it resetting right there. So what it's doing is restarting the network interface and the networking services on this machine. So now, if I do IP-ADDR, notice the IP address of the Sentinel sensor now. It used to be .31.128, but now we have a .1.34. It's a /24 network. And you'll see that the network mask is 192.168.1.125, the network address. Okay. If we look at our updated Kali, remember we haven't changed this one, but this is just based off what it was before. We'll see 192.168.1.18. If you have a /24 network, everything before this last octet of numbers or last little grouping of numbers should all be the same. So only the stuff after the last period is going to change. So based off of this, these should be on the same network. And if I come in here to the VM settings again for the updated Kali, you'll notice that this machine is also on VMnet 0, which makes sense on why we can communicate. Again, by specifying a virtual network, this is creating a network that my VMs can all talk to each other on if they're on VMnet 0 and nothing else will get in the way. So this is great. So let's try that connectivity out again. So I'm on updated Kali and I want to try to ping the Sentinel sensor. So I'm going to type in ping, and then I need the Sentinel sensor's IP address, which remember it changed. So I'm going to copy this over. It's .1.34. So if I paste this, 192.168.1.34, what do you notice here? Now you'll see this is typically what your ping results look like when things are in fact going through. All right, so I can hit Control-C to stop this, and you'll see 0% packet loss, 11 were sent, 11 received. So that means that we are getting connectivity between these two machines. And we can do this the other way as well. So I'm going to copy the IP address of the updated Kali machine, move over to my Sentinel sensor, and because these are on the same network, we should be able to ping between the two. Again, I've not done any additional routing. There's no firewall rules that would be blocking this. That's another way that things, if you're having connectivity issues, if you have firewall rules configured or additional routing stuff set up, that could be the reason why. But this is basically a fresh setup of both Kali Linuxes, and so there's no additional rules set in place. Hit Control-C just to stop that. You can add additional tags in if you only want to ping a certain amount, but it's just, you can, again, hit Control-C to stop that whenever you want. So 21 packets transmitted, 21 received, 0% packet loss. So now what we've done is we've set these two machines up on the same virtual network adapter, which is VMnet 0, which allows us to communicate between these two machines. So now if I have, let's say, a web server or something running on the updated Kali machine, I should be able to reach that from my Sentinel server. And so in order to further demonstrate this, what I just did here is I made a fake directory. I moved in to that directory, so you'll see that the current directory path updated to /fake. I created a text file called passwords.txt, and I echoed a string, which basically means I printed a string that says hello world, and I saved that into passwords.txt. So if we were to view passwords.txt, it's just going to say hello world ! I typed ls to show that file was created. And then what I've done is I've created a simple HTTP server that is running on port 80 using Python. And the reason I did this is I want to show you that using the IP address, and let's move over to our Sentinel sensor. So remember, this server is now running on updated Kali. If I move to Sentinel sensor, and remember this 192.168.1.18, that's the IP address of this updated Kali box. If I now open up Firefox or any browser, sorry, I clicked that too many times. If I type in that IP address followed by followed by the port, which is 80, and I click enter, it's going to access that web server that's running on Updated Kali. And on Updated Kali, we can see that there was a GET request for just the default route. There was a 200 response code. And so you can see these are 404s because it tried to look for a fave icon just by default to load. That's the little icon in the top corner of the web browser typically. That's not an issue. Don't worry about that. We'll talk about that later. But it also shows which IP address it was that accessed the web server, which is the .1.34, which is our Sentinel sensor IP address. So from here, because these are networked together, I can now access services such as a web server that's running on Updated Kali, because when I ran the server, I made it accessible to the entire network. So you can see it's listening on 00000. That's another way to say listen on all interfaces that this VM has. So I could access this locally using like 127.0.0.1 port 80, or I can access it by its network address being, or the IP address being the .1.18 IP, again, which is the network facing IP address for Updated Kali. So from there, if I want to serve a file on this box, I can run a simple HTTP server from my other VM, access the IP address, click on the file, and let's see what happens. And you'll see, hello world, I'm viewing that file. So I could then download this, save it to my box. I can use curl or other things if I wanted to access this another way. But I just wanted to show you how by having these networks together or put on the same network, these two different VMs, we're able to access services and different things that are running on these VMs from, another, let's say a client machine such as Sentinel Sensor in this case.